breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with Dr. Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos. We're going to jump right in it today, and we are going to break down a little bit more thoroughly diabetes for you guys. If you missed the first one, go back and watch it. We talk about the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Today, we are going to talk about if you suspect that you or someone you love has diabetes, what are the next steps? What are the lab tests that you order? Who can you order them through? And then if you do have the diagnosis of diabetes, what you can do to help manage some of those symptoms. So we're going to jump right into it. But before I do, I'm going to introduce my partner in crime here, Dr. Harrison. How's it going, man? I know that your folks were up for about a week. Are they still there? Or are they back to Canada?
No, they headed back to Canada. They got welcomed with a snowstorm. In fact, I think a big part of that, the central part of the country, they at my sister's, they got 3 feet of snow overnight. So the flight still made it there, but they did have to spend, I think it was 1 day right close to the airport because they couldn't get out. But it was warm here in Denver, so they got a nice shock when they went back to Canada. But it was good. How have you been doing? You've been doing some hunting?
Yeah, man. I tell you what, I'm not ready for the snow. They can keep it up there. I'm pretty close to Canada as it is, so I'm like a little nervous. But yeah, we've been doing some bow hunting for whitetails and maybe doing a little partridge hunting and stuff. So it's a great time of the year. I'm in northern Minnesota. The colors are beautiful, and yeah, I'm enjoying myself thoroughly. But I'm pretty excited to break this thing down for everyone. I know that we both have patients, and we're both really passionate about this because this is one of the more prevalent diseases and disorders that we work with, and it's a shame because you can do so much to prevent it, and you can also do so much to manage it if you really are thorough and you really commit to the care. So I'm going to start, I think, and then you just jump in whenever you want. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is actually the diagnosing of diabetes. So in the last episode, we talked about, if you have, excessive urination, if you have, extreme fatigue and, you're lethargic, or your kid's lethargic, or, they're gaining weight and you can't lose weight, or you're tired all the time, you might want to consider diabetes as a possibility. So in order to actually be diagnosed with diabetes, you need to run a blood test. During that blood test, you need to be fasting, and you need to have your hemoglobin A1C measured. And what the hemoglobin A1C is like your red blood cells in the presence of sugar become what is called glycosylated. And what that means is basically the cell membrane and the actual makeup of the red blood cell changes. So it measures how much sugar is attached to the outside of the red blood cell. So there's a couple of ranges associated with that. If you're in that pre-diabetic range, you're going to be in that 5.8 to 7 hemoglobin A1C, and anything above 7 is indicative of diabetes. The other aspect is going to be fasting blood sugar. Between 100 and 126, fasting blood sugar is indicative of prediabetes. Anything above 126 is indicative of diabetes. So if you're tired, you're peeing a lot, all this kind of stuff, and you're like, oh man, I need to get a test, really need to concentrate on the fasting blood sugar level and your hemoglobin A1C. HbA1c is how it's abbreviated, and that will give you the diagnostic criteria to determine if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic.
Yeah, exactly, Dr. Kolby. That I just want to jump in. These two numbers, these two most common tests, there were other ones in the past, but the fasting blood sugar, also known as glucose, is the big one. It's the one where you poke your finger at home and you can actually test if you get a kit from wherever, like the drugstore. But then there's the hemoglobin A1C, also known as A1C. You'll hear on commercials and maybe from your doctor. But that hemoglobin A1C, now they changed the numbers. It was, there was the fasting blood sugar. It was, or I should say, the hemoglobin. Both are fasting. Both these testing is fasting, as you said, Dr. Kolby. But the numbers that I've seen recently from the American Diabetic Association was you're pre-diabetic if you are 5.7 up to 6.4. That's considered pre-diabetes. And then 6.5 and above hemoglobin A1C is considered full-blown type 2 diabetes. And the glucose, the fasting blood sugar, that one has ups and downs throughout the day. So that's why you fast. Both of them you fast, but the hemoglobin or the fasting blood sugar should come down, but not go too low, but actually come down. And prediabetes is it's 5.7 to 6, or sorry, it is 100 to 125, and 126 and up is diabetes. So these are just ranges, but if you're pre-diabetic, don't ignore it. This stuff gets severe fast, and all the symptoms, like you said, Dr. Kolby, they are red flags. They are red flags. Don't ignore them. And I see some of my clients, and I know you do as well, where they'll say, well, I don't have a family history of it, so I'm probably in the clear. No. Type 2 diabetes, as we said in a previous podcast, 95% of all diabetic cases are type 2, and that's 100% lifestyle dependent. So don't see family history as a burden that you're going to develop it, and don't see like a bad family history that you're going to develop it, because it's lifestyle. It could be higher risk, but it's all you. And don't see that a good family history is a get out of jail free card. You can
right. A lack of family history doesn't necessarily necessitate a get out of jail free card. I also wanted to point out too, because out of the two markers that you're going to be looking at, the hemoglobin A1C is going to be the one that's more indicative of prediabetes or diabetes. And that's because the average life cycle of a red blood cell is 120 days. So it gives you a long snapshot of actually how long the blood sugar's been elevated. So if you come back and you have a A1C of 7, and your blood sugar is at 100, it's like, oh no, I'm good. Nope, your blood sugar has been chronically elevated, and your hemoglobin A1C is elevated because that red blood cell has been floating around in your body for 120 days in the presence of glucose. So that just because you have one that's out and the other that's not, it's important to know the values of them, and it's important to look at the integrity of that test. So they're both really, really valid. If you really need to have both done, is what I'm trying to say.
I agree. It'll tell you, because that fasting blood sugar will have its ups and downs throughout the day, but the hemoglobin A1C is that 3-month window of blood sugar of where you're at. And if one is higher, the other is high, it doesn't matter. If one is high, that's a diagnosis. You should do it twice. You should do at least twice to make sure you're there. I have never done, and I know I don't, the same thing with you, Dr. Kolby. If you found it high once, the second test is always high as well. So it's
always high.
Yeah. It's not like high. Maybe we caught it by accident or it's a mistake.
So on top of that, so say you have been diagnosed, you do the blood work now, and it's like, now what? Okay, so Dr. Harrison, I'm going to send my aunt, my uncle into you. Yeah, she was peeing a lot. She was tired. She, had some tingling going on in her extremities. I send her to you. You do the blood test. She's confirmed that she's a diabetic. What's the next step? Well,
as a natural doc, like we both are, definitely we'd want medical intervention. We would refer to a medical doctor so they can look at it. The medical doctor's approach, the conventional medical model, is drugs like metformin. You brought this up in the last podcast. Metformin will reduce your blood sugar to make kind of your insulin more effective in your body. And that's just one drug. There's many drugs like metformin. So it increases your insulin sensitivity. All it's doing is buying you time. That's all it is. I call metformin, there's a place for these, but I'm still going to knock them. Metformin is a gateway drug, okay? It's just a beginning. I know you're laughing, Dr. Gold. What it is just a beginning to the next step. Now, there is a place for every drug. I truly believe that, and I know you do as well, Dr. Kolby. But if people want to prevent the side effects of these drugs, because they're very dangerous and not have to depend on them, they got to do something else. But metformin is the first step that they'll do. And then when metformin doesn't work anymore, so if people don't make changes in their lifestyle, then they're going to go on insulin. And then they're going to go on a certain level of insulin that keeps up. But then your body gets numb to the insulin. You talked about insulin resistance last time. So what happens, then your dose of insulin gets higher, and then you maintain the same lifestyle, which is unfavorable. And then insulin goes higher and higher and higher till the insulin doesn't work. So that is the medical approach to it. For type 1, we're grateful we have insulin because the type 1s aren't making insulin, as you said, Dr. Kolby. So that is the medical approach. The first step is refer to a medical doctor, make sure they're going to work on the team. And I say team because The medical approach definitely isn't the only answer for these problems. And the natural model, in many cases, isn't the only approach. You got to have both. That's true integrative medicine.
Well, I think that an important thing is too, like you pointed out, like it's only going to work for so long. So how many times have I've had this patient that came in and, he's like, oh, I'm going to a family reunion. I'm really excited because, they cook all this delicious cakes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, you should not be eating that. You're diabetic. Well, no, it's fine. I just upped my insulin dose. That is not a good recipe for longevity for you. That is just counterproductive. It's counterintuitive. And you're putting yourself in long-term danger because, like we talked about in the last one, some consequences of unregulated diabetes, you get your foot cut off, you lose your vision, your kidneys go to crap, your pancreas dies. It's not a pretty outcome.
And dementia and Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what
they're
calling
talking about Alzheimer's being as like type 1.5 diabetes, where it's just unregulated blood sugar, that's causing damage to your frontal lobes.
Exactly. It's madness because the American Diabetic Association, this was 2 years ago, they made a statement. They said as the baby boomer generation ages, diabetes or Alzheimer's is expected to skyrocket. And that's because and I think I mentioned this last time, if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic, your risk of Alzheimer's goes up like 300 to 400%. And the baby boomers were the first generation to get exposed to post-war wealth, high,
TV dinners, manufactured foods.
Exactly. And we're picking on the baby boomers as they are a higher risk population, and they are. But what about the generations under them? Everybody else, it's going to be way worse.
It is going to be worse. I mean, there was, up until a couple of years ago, there was a clear distinction. They called it, juvenile diabetes and adult onset diabetes. They don't even call it that anymore because we have kids that are developing type 2 diabetes. I have a 7-year-old that has type 2 diabetes. That was unheard of 30 years ago.
Exactly, exclusively lifestyle, and so that's the medical model, I guess, of it. And I say, the medical model there's a place for it, but type 2 diabetes is exclusively lifestyle dependent. So, in my office, and I know similar approach with you, Dr. Kolby, the first thing we're going to look at, there's two big pieces. One is, what are you putting in your mouth? Are you eating something that's driving your blood sugar and compromising, your pancreas and creating this storm? That's number one. But diabetes, as I mentioned in the last one, high blood sugar isn't only what you put in your mouth. Stress responses can do this as well. Physical, chemical, or emotional stressors drive that cortisol, and cortisol's one of its main jobs is to drive blood sugar to let you deal with stress. So if you're in a physically stressed, emotionally stressed, chemically stressed situation, you're going to have higher blood sugar than you should just due to a stress response. So diet and lifestyle, it sounds pretty simple, but it actually isn't. Because you can even have immune irritation, a food that you have an allergy to. If you have a food that you have an allergy to, that's a massive irritation. You're going to end up with high cortisol, high blood sugar just due to that stress. So eating real foods, number one, and testing to make sure that you're not going to have a food irritation that's driving blood sugar indirectly. And then stress management strategies, and then trying to burn up that blood sugar with physical activity. Sleep patterns. It's a big story to get that down. But one of the benefits of all of that is you not only become healthier, you lean out, because high blood sugar equals, more weight gain. Oh, Dr. Kolby, I can't hear you there.
Oh, sorry about
that.
There
you are.
So I also think too, one of the aspects that we haven't talked about is a lot of people don't really understand what healthy eating is. I have a family member that is diabetic, and he's like, oh, I'm snacking more healthy. I'm eating this and this and this. Well, the problem is like, we've been educated, we've been conditioned, the snack that smiles back, it's a healthy alternative because it's baked and not fried, but that is not a healthy alternative for diabetics. So that's when you have to, look at all these different avenues, and that's why you have to really tailor your diet and really know and get help that knows what they're doing. Because if you're making a cognitive effort, and you're going to want to put forth all the effort to make the healthy lifestyle changes, you got to make sure that you're actually implementing actual healthy lifestyle changes, eating low glycemic fruits, eating healthy vegetables, eating good meats, eliminating like high glycemic loads, foods like that. So that's the part where you really have to implement some really good strategies and have some really good supportive casts.
Exactly. Like even in my story, when, Dr. Kolby and I studied together, we worked on our doctorates in Minneapolis. I was like all of us where we were under a lot of stress and, physical stress, emotional stress, sleep deprivation. It was just the whole storm. And some of us managed it better than others. I wasn't one of those people that managed it that well. And, the first year into the program, I turned into a pre-diabetic. My hemoglobin A1C was 5.8. My fasting blood sugar was 115. And in the next year when we redid it, everything was off the charts. I actually went over and I turned into a type 2 diabetic. Through a lot of changes and getting the stressors out of my life and learning how to manage them, I was actually able to come off it. But it was bad. It was really inflamed, digestive issues, brain fog, concentration. It was really, really bad. So even from personal experience, and I know Dr. Kolby, you see diabetic cases all the time, but this is serious stuff. It is the one thing, blood sugar, that you can guarantee that's going to develop heart disease, peripheral neuropathy, numbness and tingling, energy loss, weight gain, kidney failure. It's like the number one cause of kidney failure, that and high blood pressure. So this whole diabetes nightmare, it is a nightmare, but don't ever forget the statement of 90 to 95% of all diabetic cases are type 2, and type 2 is exclusively lifestyle dependent. So it can be turned around. You get on it early and put the work in, as you mentioned, Dr. Kolby, not just looking at foods and not a fad diet. This is a lifestyle, and it should be done with incremental small changes that are sustainable. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing that. I actually did not know that you were diabetic at one point. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit from a teacher that we both have, and we both, have learned a lot from. Unregulated blood sugar is just like a little bad guy running around in your arteries with knives, poking holes and everything. And it does that to your kidneys, and it does that to your arteries, and it does that to your retinal cells in your eyes. I mean, this stuff is not good. I mean, and it really has the possibility of profoundly impacting your life for the rest of your life. I shared this in the last video. One of my really good friends' father lost his leg to type 2 diabetes because he stepped on a thumbtack. I mean, how easily could that happen to anyone that you love or know? This is why we decided to do this series, to do these 2 segments on diabetes, because it affects like 26 million Americans a year. That's
50% of the American population.
Yeah. And on top of that, not only is it affecting 50% of us, but it's actually moving down in age demographics. Yeah. Now we have kids that are 5, 6, 7 that are developing these diseases that weren't occurring until the 30s, 40s, and 50s, not even that many years ago. This is an epidemic. It really is. I recently saw a statistic that the millennials is the first group of, the first population that won't outlive their parents. And that's going to be largely because of diabetes. Diabetes is going to bankrupt the American healthcare system, they say, because not only just because of diabetes, but consequences of diabetes. This is where you get the neuropathies, the retinopathies, the nephropathies. This is why you're going to have kidney transplants. I mean, this stuff is nasty. And if you have pre-diabetes, you need to get it taken.
Exactly. And I touch on dementia and Alzheimer's, entire hospital wards and wings of hospital dealing with memory problems, the population with dementia. It's not normal for our brains to give up before the rest of our bodies. That's the final frontier. And I know, Dr. Kolby, you're working with brains every day. That's what you do as a functional neurologist. And to destroy the brain over a lifestyle, just because it's on the shelf, just because it's, it says it's good for you, or no trans fats, or whatever's out there, or only no trans fats, all these crazy things and these stickers from the American Heart Association and all these other things, low fat, low calorie, be careful with that, because a lot of these substitutions of sweeteners are the cause of one of the major cause of type 2 diabetes. So just because it's on the shelf or in a cart does not mean that it's food, and doesn't mean that it's good for you. Doesn't mean that it's not poison.
Right. And we're not trying to downplay how difficult this is going to be, because it is going to be difficult when you're diabetic. And this is just the studies talking. They took lab rats, and they gave them cocaine, and then they gave them sugar, and then they put cocaine on one side of a maze and sugar on the other side of the maze, and guess which one the rats went to? It wasn't the cocaine. It was the sugar. So here's the thing. We realize it's going to be difficult, but for your long-term health and for the health of your family, you want to be around for your kids, your grandkids, or your significant other, whatever. Everyone's got a reason to be around, right? So for that reason, you need to make sure that you're proactive. It's not going to be easy, but it is doable.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, I know we could talk about cases and crazy cases that were able to turn it around. We both had many cases that pre-diabetics, and and I'm sure you, Dr. Kolby, even had diabetics that were able to turn it around if you catch it early enough. It takes work, it takes commitment, but everybody's life is worth more than that. Everybody in this world has someone that depends on them and cares for them, and your health affects everyone around you, and diabetes is no exception. In fact, it destroys lives, destroys families. So, I think we should probably wrap it up there, Dr. Kolby. If Dr. Kolby's way out in Minnesota, and we talked about turning around these blood sugar problems and correcting them with diagnosis, strategy, lifestyle, etc. How can people reach out to you, Dr. Kolby, if they want some help?
Sure. So you can get on our website. Our website is www.northlakeschiropractic.com. That'll give you all the information you need to get a hold of me. You can find us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is North Lakes Chiropractic and Functional Neurology. And you can contact us on there as well. What about yourself? Why don't you give your contacts?
Yeah, I'm in the Denver, Colorado area. We work with people remotely as well, so you don't need to be here. We work with people all over the country, even out of country. We're at www.drgharrison.com, or just Google the Center of Functional Medicine, Denver, Colorado, and you'll find us. And we can definitely help. This is one thing that can be corrected. In most cases, just get on it right away. And it doesn't matter if you're, 20 or 95. I've had 95-year-old diabetics who were able to make drastic changes in their blood sugar, energy, weight, everything. So it can be done. It can be done. There is hope.
And as always, if you found this content, valuable or, useful, please share it with your loved ones, for anyone that you know that might be suffering from these conditions. Our goal is to help as many people as we can, and maybe spread the information and help as many people from developing diabetes as we can. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode of Brainstorming with Dr. Harrison and Dr. Kolby.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kolby. We'll see you next day.